Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our BCSC School Board Candidate Virtual Public Forum hosted by Columbus Educators Association. I'm your moderator, Alan Berkmeyer. I'm an association representative for CEA, Brown County resident, and teacher in Columbus. Tonight's format will be simple. All the candidates will be given a 1 minute to introduce themselves. After that, I will ask them 10 questions. Candidates will respond in a rotating order by district and within their districts. Each candidate will receive 1 minute to respond to each question. After we have made it through all 10 questions, each candidate will give a 1 minute closing remark, after which we will conclude. The only candidate missing from tonight's forum is Mr. Bryant from District 5, who had a family emergency. We wish him and his family the best. Our questions tonight will be divided into 4 categories: engaging all stakeholders, focusing on students, district, staff issues, and reflecting and growing as a corporation. Questions were submitted by educators in BCSC. We will begin with opening statements. First up from District 3 is Mr. Mike Jamerson.
Good evening. As a parent, a grandparent, and a community member for the past 33 years, I'm deeply concerned about public education in Bartholomew County. I believe that BCSC is doing many things very well. These include instructional pathways such as the Columbus Signature Academy and the Spanish Immersion Program, and targeted programs such as iGrad and Transitions. However, I know that every organization has room for improvement. While BCSC is in a much better place than many other school districts, the past 6 months have placed incredible challenges on our students, teachers, support staff, parents, and administrators. As a member of the BCSC School Board, I will work hard to make sure that the board's policies and decisions are always learner-centered and transparent. I hope that I can earn your vote.
Next, also from District 3, Mr. Todd Grimes.
Good evening, everyone. As a lifelong resident of Columbus, I believe our community has a lot to be proud of. I'm also quick to recognize that one of the measuring sticks used to gauge the success of any community is a thriving school corporation. As a professional educator in public schools for the past 30 years, I feel my variety of classroom experiences would bring a unique perspective to the BCSC board. During my 13 years as a student in BCSC schools, I was fortunate enough to have had many excellent teachers that provided me lessons I still reflect upon today. Our kids went to BCSC school, and now our grandkids attend school within BCSC. It would be a real honor to serve the Columbus community as a member of the BCSC School Board.
Our final candidate from District 3, Mr. James Persinger.
Hello, I'm James Persinger, the current representative for District 3 on the BCSC School Board. I'd just like to say thank you to ISTA for their technical and logistical support, and the CEA and teachers of BCSC for hosting this forum and giving all of us candidates a chance to voice our opinions and views to the community. I'm looking forward to an insightful and civil discourse. So, thank you.
Now moving over to District 5, Mrs. Jennifer Corsi.
Hi. My husband and I have 2 awesome kids. Our oldest is in 1st grade at the Legato program at Clifty Creek Elementary, and our youngest is at Learning Tree Preschool. My mother was a teacher. She instilled in me a very strong sense of the importance of a quality education. She also made sure that I knew the importance of being in my community and involved and active, and I've sought out ways in which I can do these things. At this point in my life, it's through the education of my children, and it's why the past 4 years I have been on the board of Learning Tree Preschool, and I'm also on Clifty Creek Elementary PTO. And it's very important to me that education for all children is something that we strive for as a corporation. Running for school board, hopefully being elected, deepens my commitment for our education program.
And now for our District 7 candidates. First up, Ms. Lacretia Ulery.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you so that I can introduce myself and learn what's important to you. After graduating from public schools in Madison County, I received an accounting degree from Indiana State University. My husband's a retired engineer, and we are parents of 2 children who grew up in Columbus. Our daughter is employed by Purdue as an extension educator, and our son is currently serving as a lieutenant in the United States Navy, and we have 1 grandson. We've lived in Columbus for 33 years, and this is the first time I've ran for office. I'm the Director of Finance for Turning Point Domestic Violence Services, and before that, I worked for 21 years for the Irwin Miller family. My experience as a 4-H leader and a coordinator for international exchange students has informed me of the energy our educators and parents pour into the shaping of our young people today, and I hope to continue to be a part of that effort.
Also from District 7, Mrs. Nicole Wheeldon.
Hi, thank you for having me. If I wasn't nervous before, I now understand what stiff competition I have. So I'm honored to be amongst you all. I am a Columbus resident for about 18 years now. I came here after graduating from Purdue. I am proudly married for 14 years. I have 3 children in 7th, 4th, and 1st grade. And I'm also the plant manager of the Walesboro engine plant just south of town. We make the best diesel engine that Ram has ever seen. Okay, I'm very proud of what I do. I'm seeking this role just because I recognize how important education has been in my life, and I just want that for my children. I want them to have even more opportunities than I've had. So I'm passionate about being part of something that can give that to them. I also recognize just how important it is just in our lives. If I didn't know it before, the look in my eyes when my kids got to go back to school after 5 months of spending with me made me understand how important school is. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. With no time to lose, let's jump into our first part of the evening. The first 2 questions will be based around engaging all stakeholders. So let's begin with question 1. As board members, we know that you will be representing your constituents, bringing in leaders from the community and working hard to govern our schools. Who do you consider to be the primary stakeholders in our school system, and how would you engage them in the governing process? First up from District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
Wow, what a question. Okay, so the primary stakeholders for our school corporation would be, first and foremost, our students and our teachers. I think that they are at the core of what we're here to do. Teachers instill upon the values to our children, and they're the people that I want to go to. If I have a question, if I have something that I'm wondering, how's it going to go in school, I want to find out from the teachers. And this is something that I've been doing as a candidate. I was on the phone last night to 3 or 4 different teachers trying to find out what's working for them. What could we do better as a school corporation? And also with parents, talking to them as well. I won't leave anybody out. That's not my goal. Thank you.
And now from District 7, Mrs. Wheeldon.
So, I think the primary customer of our education system is our kids. And I have 3 of them at home that will tell me all about the things that they love and don't love about school. That's easy. But obviously, the perspective of teachers, I totally agree with Jennifer, is really important. They get to see what our kids are doing every day. They get to speak to us about the resources they do or don't have available. So obviously that's important. Taxpayers and the community at large is also a big part of the stakeholder community, I think, for our school board. And so I think, and how I would reach out to them, I am part of our community. And so just talking about the schools, what they're working, how they're working for us, how they're not, with kind of all of these people as I'm able to come across them is important. I would actively like to visit schools and spend some time with teachers and in classrooms. I think that's really important, just to see them at work and really have a firsthand appreciation for the roles. Thank you.
From District 7, Mrs. Ulery.
Our students, parents, and educators for sure are the primary stakeholders. The employers and higher education avenues are the ultimate stakeholders as our students eventually make their way out to become citizens and contribute to their community. I would ask for feedback from these entities to determine if what we are sending out as a product of our school system is serving the needs for continued growth and improvement in our county. It makes an enormous responsibility to educate these young people, and the entire community should be invested in their success. The success of our school corporation depends entirely on the success of all of our staff. This means the bus drivers who make sure the students' transportation is safe, custodial staff who maintain our buildings, our food service professionals, and of course, our educators.
Now moving over to District 3, Mr. Grimes.
Again, as a teacher for the last 30 years, I can certainly say from firsthand experience, there's no shortage of stakeholders in our public schools, from the taxpayers to community members to very important to state legislators making very important decisions, guiding schools. But certainly the backbone, I believe, of any quality school corporation, students most certainly first, followed closely by teachers and parents. And I think a common theme throughout engaging all stakeholders is open, honest, forthright communication, and to be able to give stakeholders as many chances to express their views in as many different formats as possible. Thank you.
Also from District 3, Mr. Persinger.
Yes, just to echo everybody else so far, of course, students and teachers are the primary stakeholders of our school corporation, but there isn't anybody in the community that is not affected by the quality of education that our community members receive, from elementary school all the way through high school, and then again to post-secondary education, our local colleges especially. Now, as far as engagement with those stakeholders, at this day and age, with the technology that we have available, that we've obviously seen over the last several months, there are many different ways through email, Zoom chats, telephone calls, texts. We have surveys and questionnaires, and there's just all kinds of forums out there that we could utilize to get feedback from everybody who has an opinion or a concern. Thank you.
Lastly, from District 3, Mr. Jamerson.
While BCSC's primary stakeholders are obviously their students, we can't really forget the administrators who serve those students each and every day. And we also have to remember the parents and caregivers for those students. And finally, the residents of Bartholomew County and the many employers in this county are important stakeholders also. The first, and I think most important piece about making good decisions is to involve those stakeholders, and it's critical to have a process for gathering the input from them. The stakeholder engagement process that BCSC already has in place is a great model for understanding who those stakeholders are and engaging them in the processes. As a board member, I will encourage BCSC to continue to use that process as they explore issues and develop solutions and challenges as to how to best address all our students.
Thank you, candidates. Up next is question number 2. Parents know that school board members are involved in our district in ways other than attending school board meetings. If elected, how would you be present in our schools? From District 7 this time, we're going to start with Mrs. Ulery.
I think that making sure that each of the places that we are represented, we need to be able to go in and obviously get in the loop of what the issues are before, the layout, the way that the security is laid out, assuming that not everything is equal across the school system, but for sure we have a building plan, an equipment plan, and I would hope to be able to walk through and see some of those issues that are needing some focus. Thank you.
Next, also from District 7, Mrs. Wheeldon.
Hi, so I spoke to it a little bit on the last one. I work in a plant, and so there's nothing short of you need to go and see the problems. So I do think having a presence in school and with, supportive administration, kind of going into school, observing classrooms, things like that is really important. I also feel like, using the tools that are available to the board to raise up the trends. I keep saying I want to spend time in classrooms, but I also recognize that the things that the board needs to be really clear and understanding are the issues that kind of bubble up, through the process and get presented to us so that we can research those things and form our opinions more specifically with stakeholders that are involved. So I think that's what I would bring is trying to get some better firsthand knowledge and also being a good student myself and trying to learn through issues in other creative ways.
Okay, moving over to District 3, Mr. Persinger.
Currently, the board had a policy, well, up until coronavirus, the board had a policy of going to different schools for their board meetings. So every 2 weeks or so, we'd be at a different location. And we would typically be there a little bit earlier than the board meeting to take a tour around the school, listen to the principal, vice principal, whoever else was giving the tour, learning about the history of the building or recent construction upgrades or modifications that have been done. Basically just, all the latest happenings of that particular location. But personally, I would always ask to see a little bit more inside outside of just the quick 15-20 minute pre-meeting tour. It'd be nice to be able to have like a weekly available time to go to a different building, just meet one-on-one with the principal. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Also from District 3, Mr. Jamerson.
As the Director of Technology for 20 years at BCSC, I've had the opportunity to spend many, many hours in each of the buildings and in many, many unusual places in those buildings for that matter. I do think it's important to visit those buildings on a regular basis to learn more about them. However, I think it's always essential that a board member be sensitive to the relationship between the board member and the other portions of BCSC, and not become involved too deeply in the minutiae of the operation. Again, I think the ideas of meeting and touring buildings is an excellent opportunity to get to know those buildings and to understand the needs.
Now, District 3 candidate, Mr. Grimes.
Yeah, certainly. One of my many favorite parts of being a teacher is getting to know kids beyond the four walls of a classroom and attending extracurricular events, and be they academic or athletic. And I see being a potential school board member as much the same. I would certainly, just like teaching, I am certainly not just during the school day person. And as a school board member, I wouldn't just be someone to show up to the meetings and that be it either. I would get involved, be at extracurriculars at all the different buildings, whether it be a basketball game or a science fair. And, I really feel like that would be the best way to get a real good pulse on BCSC as a whole.
And lastly, from District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
Okay, so this is my favorite question of the two that we've had so far. I have already started making appointments to tour some of these schools, trying to get in there while the kids are in there too. I mean, part of being a school board member, not just showing up to the meetings, not just the things that you have to do, but what is it like as a student? What is it like, what are the teachers doing? I have a goal also to ride buses. And I'm not even joking. I want to ride a bus from Shadow Creek to Mount Healthy because I've heard that that is a long haul. And I want to know what those students are going through as they're doing this. I want to play on the playgrounds. I want to have lunch with the kids. I want to find out more of the facility issues. I want to be there and be someone that teachers and students can recognize as someone who cares about their school. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, candidates, on how you will engage all stakeholders and be present in our schools. For our next section of the night, our questions will focus on our student population. Specifically, we're going to focus on those students whose needs are often considered at the margins of education. Question number 3. Overall, BCSC takes pride in its use of UDL to center the educational needs of students at the margins, specifically students with disabilities, EL students, and accelerated students. What should our corporation's next step to continue meeting the needs of all students be? First up, from District 3, Mr. Grimes.
Well, that's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. My master's is in special education, and the last 15 years of my 30 years as a teacher have been with kids, students that come from various disadvantaged circumstances. And each Tuesday morning, we meet. I happen to teach at an academy that is juniors and seniors that are at risk of graduating. And we take essentially a whatever it takes approach. And we brainstorm each week, what are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not working? Where can we improve? What professional development opportunities are out there that would be worth our time? Today, a big push in education and a growing need of so many students, social emotional learning continues to be a point of emphasis. And, to summarize, I would say, whatever it takes.
Next from District 3, Mr. Jamerson.
BCSC has some great programs, I think, for addressing the needs of specific populations of our students. And those include things like the transition program, which is supported by Columbus TIP funds for students with special needs. The iGrad program for students who are at risk of not graduating. Our cultural responsiveness program, and underlying all of that, the framework of universal design for learning. But when we look at new ways to address the needs of specific populations, I think it's really important that we involve the populations themselves through a process such as the stakeholder engagement process, because I think we need to make sure that we are creating solutions with them, not for them or to them.
Lastly, from District 3, Mr. Persinger.
Yes, like Mr. Jamerson said, the UDL framework is an excellent baseline for which to educate and cater to students that are, considered out on the margins. But I know that one of the greatest things that we could do for those students and their teachers would be an increase of resources. Basically, like Mr. Grimes said, whatever it takes for them, but whatever they need to be able to provide them what they need to reach their students and to have the students engage with their teachers on a consistent basis. I think that would be the most important way to ensure that they're going to get the quality education that they deserve.
Now from District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
Yes, I've actually spoken to the director of the ELL yesterday. She was kind enough to pick up the phone when I called, which was awesome. She talked to me about UDL and the importance of implementing that program. I've also spoken to a counselor at one of the elementary schools about the importance of UDL creativity and getting kids involved and ways to have teachers think out of the box. As far as special education, when I have had the opportunity to speak with a couple of the folks in those programs, they've said that things that we need to look at is more funding and not just a student-teacher ratio, but think about what are the needs of those specific kids in regards to the needs of the staff. And those are things that we really need to focus on so that these children aren't just shuffled to the side. They really need some focus. Thank you.
And now our District 7 candidates. Up first, Mrs. Wheeldon.
So I'm at a bit of a disadvantage. I'm not familiar with all of the programs that are available to kids with disabilities today. I will say firsthand, I've had family members who have had disabilities and grown up through a school system near here. And I was impressed with all of the accommodations that that school system was able to make. But just in talking with him on a day-to-day basis, there will always be small things. So I think I agree with Mr. Jamerson a bit that I need to know what the gaps are today to really have, the best educated answer on this. I will say that I'm pretty impressed just having the student Northside that there are a lot of these outreach opportunities for not maybe kids who are seen as underprivileged or with disabilities, but are really focusing in on kids that maybe have some social needs as well. There's a program called All In that's really helping young men who might not have a father figure, figure out how to get through life. And I think those are really amazing programs. I'd like to see how we encourage and increase those.
And lastly, from District 7, Mrs. Ulery.
I know that we have several populations that are marginalized, and just recognizing those it can be a great first step, and I know we're doing a pretty good job of that. For students that are learning English, we need to place qualified educators with these students and then connect them with resources within our community for continued educational reinforcement. For students of color, I think provide education to staff, such as training related to implicit bias, et cetera, so that they have more tools to be able to be effective in teaching. We also need to look at the diversity of the current staff and ask, does it reflect our community? For low-income students, be certain these students are showing up and receive meals. It's important also to not disclose these students' particular needs to other students. We should always be able to look for ways to shift the cost of education away from those least able to afford it.
Thank you, candidates. Question 4. During the last several years, racism, white supremacy, racial justice, and other similar topics have become both a national and local conversation. As the diversity of our student population continues to grow, what should BCSC do to specifically address the needs of our students of color and combat racism? First, from District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
That's a heavy issue. And I can tell you that we cannot stay idle. We need to look at within ourselves. What is that doing to ourselves? I'm reading a book right now called Me and White Supremacy. And it's a book study on how to get yourself out of this type of thing, as far as acknowledging that you have this implicit bias. And I think that that is something that whatever team would be involved at BCSC to really get involved. God, I've said involved twice now. I'm passionate about it. You can't just gloss over and say we should all just get along. You have to dive deep into who you are as a human and how you can help others. I would do a lot of deep digging and reading, and I will look into that more for sure. Thank you.
From District 7, Mrs. Ulery.
I would offer to bring those educators that are outside and true people that are a little bit more experienced in the ways of training the trainer. But for sure, as a first step, go through the implicit bias training for every staff member. We have done that at Turning Point, and it was just truly an amazing revelation into just my way of upbringing, my way of thinking, and how I approach children just going down the halls, meeting them in the United Way building. It really causes a great self-reflection. I think it's a great way to start. And again, I would ask the question, does our staff reflect our community? Thank you.
Also from District 7, Mrs. Wheeldon.
This is a heavy topic and obviously really important. Obviously education of students to understand the differences in the races and things like that is important. And I do think that teachers would probably need some support in being able to have those tough conversations. I also think that creating experiences for kids to really understand how these things play out in real life, what is their role as a growing member of society, is really important. I do work in a place where diversity is really important. I see it play out in many ways, and it is important to attack the problem or the conversation bravely, right? But also be prepared for people with really very strong opinions and know how to work your way through that. So it's a place that I think teachers would need some support, but I also think looking at it creatively on other ways to bring this into kids' lives is really important. Thank you.
Now for our District 3 candidates, Mr. Jamerson.
Well, I think one of the implicit bias is certainly an important part in understanding that of each individual in our own personal ways. But we also, once again, can look to what Universal Design for Learning has taught us in the areas of cultural responsiveness and continue to improve and spread that through BCSC. I think the other important piece is that, and it's unfortunate that Mr. Bryant couldn't join us tonight as the only person of color who's on the board today. And I think it's important to listen and speak with them as opposed to just trying to decide what we need to do for them.
Next from District 3, Mr. Persinger.
Yes, on the subject of racism, first and foremost, the most important thing is to admit that there is a problem. Especially, as we see nationally, racism is unfortunately alive and well in this country. Everybody, really across every race and color spectrum, has an implicit bias for their own personal group, and recognizing that and having a conversation with people from other ethnic backgrounds and other races is very important to come to the understanding that we are all humans. We are just one big collective people, and in our community we all live together and amongst each other. And I think it would also be important to really get kids at a younger age involved in the other cultures and the histories of other ethnicities that they go to school with. Thank you.
Lastly, District 3 candidate, Mr. Grimes.
This question is one that we've paid particular attention to where I teach this year. In fact, it was 2 weeks ago, I participated in a conference put on by the Anti-Defamation League, and it was an incredibly thought-provoking, challenging discussion that was very necessary. And I think to really tackle this issue, we need to have the hard discussions that make people uncomfortable. And, we delineated between the different levels of oppression, privilege, and that relationship in terms of specific ideas, we are looking to expand our relationship with the Anti-Defamation League and bring more professional development opportunities to our teachers there.
Thank you. Question 5. BCSC strives to meet the needs of students that traditionally face challenges in school, and students that come from a low-income family and/or students that are food and housing insecure. They certainly face additional obstacles in receiving a strong education. How will you ensure as a school board member that those students are having their needs addressed? First, from District 7, Mrs. Wheeldon.
I will say we, at work, we do this BCSC program, and every time I get a chance to pack one of those, I'm humbled to know that there are kids that really struggle with food at home, with guidance at home and things like that. So it is a really important part of our population. I think about 50% of our kids are free or reduced lunch. So it's also prolific, right? It's a big issue for us. I think understanding the specific needs is important. I also personally think that pre-K, starting an education in some structure as early as possible for children who may struggle in that way is really important to help them socialize, to help them get used to the environment, and to give them maybe a little bit of a leg up. So that's something I really think is important, getting kids into school earlier and seeing how we can expand on that in our school district. Thank you.
Also from District 7, Mrs. Ulery.
Yeah, I agree with that, Nicole. That it's nearly 50% of the children in our corporation, and it's startling, I think, that it's approached that level. But they are identified, and we are able then to address that issue. That's kind of one of the things you need to do. We've come a long way over the years of being able to make sure that we can identify those students safely, quietly, so that they're not called out. That can send a rippling effect for other societal issues within their population. So to be sure just to ID them, get them the resources, and then make sure that we're able to provide now 2 meals daily, the weekend meals. There are the backsacks that go out in the summer. It's an amazing to be able to coordinate with other agencies. Thank you.
Now from District 3, Mr. Persinger.
The current programs that we have are good, but I do believe that we need to expand on them exponentially. For example, the backsack program. We also have, the FSSs that are, working with our school in conjunction with, Centerstone. But I think the best way to get an idea of what we could do to help the students that are on free, reduced, lower income, is to reach out and actually talk to them, talk to the students, talk to their parents, find out what it is that they need, find out exactly what kind of resources we can expand our list to include. I mean, honestly, the best way to know is just to directly ask them and find out.
Next, also from District 3, Mr. Grimes.
Yeah, I will try to confine this to a minute. I could go on for a long time with this. I teach in an academy that we have many disadvantaged kids coming from poverty. Lots of experience writing grants. There's so many grants out there that go underutilized. We were fortunate enough to get a couple new grants this year. We feed our kids in the morning. So many kids come to us unfed. We provide them with healthy snacks. There's so many community, and I'm convinced the same is true in Columbus, that there's so many community organizations that would be willing to partner with the schools, that I think there's just an underutilization of resources right now that really could be tapped into, and building relationships with the kids, again, inside and outside of school, and having a real genuine caring adult in their lives is invaluable.
Third from District 3, Mr. Jamerson.
Equity has always been an important part of how I've worked and planned and thought about BCSC. One of my particular passions is digital equity, and the access to affordable, high-speed internet connections continues to be not only a district problem, but a community problem and an issue that we really have to work together to address. As we saw last spring, far too many of our students, and in fact, some of our teachers, do not have access to high-speed internet. Some of those are for economic reasons, and some are for geographic reasons. But with respect to the other issues in terms of food insecurity and housing insecurity, we need to continue the programs that we have today and build upon those to touch those students and to get in contact with them. Thank you.
Lastly, from District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
Would you be so kind as to repeat the entire question? I don't want to miss any part of that.
Sure. How will you ensure as a school board member that those students who are having their needs addressed, those students being food and housing insecure and low-income families?
Okay, thank you very much for repeating that for me. As far as addressing the needs of those students, I think that I believe it was the FDA grant that was received by the school corporation to allow the free meals for breakfast and lunch through the remainder of the school year, or at least until those funds run out. That has been huge. They had that over the summer as well, and I believe also during the time of when everyone was online in the spring. That's fantastic. I would try to, as a school board member, find out where can we find more funds to do things like that. I've also spoken to Paulette Roberts, who is the head of the Columbus Enrichment Program, and she talked to me specifically about tutoring and how these kids it's a free program, but regardless of their income, they're able to have tutors help them get at grade level or exceed that. That's how I would get involved more. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for offering your perspectives on how we can best serve these students at the margins. For our next section of the evening, we'll be asking about some district, staff, and administrative issues. As school board members, you will be involved in these matters to some degree, and your perspectives are important. Question 6. Last year, BCSC's annual staff satisfaction survey revealed an overall declining satisfaction with the corporation. What would you do to strengthen the relationship between district leadership and its teachers and staff? Now note, we will be asking another question about policy 3112. So if you'd like to speak to that, you'll be given some more time later on. But again, for question 6, what would you do to strengthen the relationship between the district leadership and its teachers and staff? First up from District 3, Mr. Jamerson.
I think one of the important pieces that as a board member I would want to do would be to really look more deeply at exactly what elements of this satisfaction survey showed in terms of where the disconnects were, where the dissatisfaction is. Because I think we have to work with people to bring them together to understand what the issues are and how we can better bring those administrators and those teachers together to determine exactly what we need. I'm hoping also that the referendum and the attention that we've paid to salary will help address some of the issues related to staff satisfaction.
Next, District 3 candidate, Mr. Grimes.
Yeah, just kind of like Mr. Jamerson just said, I don't think it's just enough to say, that the staff satisfaction survey reported a decline in satisfaction. It's important to get into the results, find common themes. What are the details? What are the areas that are creating the dissatisfaction? And and really get into the results and separate them. And I think, the key to anything, open, honest, full, disclosure of the results, and not just, picking and choosing what's disclosed, but the whole package needs to be disclosed. And as with anything, open, honest communication just can't be emphasized enough. And again, keeping in mind, administrators, staff have to get along to keep the kids in mind, which is what we're in this business for.
Third, also from District 3, Mr. Persinger.
I think one of the biggest things that we could do would be to really adopt and follow a honest and transparent basis of communication between the administration, the staff, and the board, honestly, because as a board member over the last 4 years, one thing that I have increasingly grown frustrated about was a communication disconnect between faculty and staff and us members on the board. Everything seems to always have to be filtered through the superintendent or through the administration, or at the very least through the CEA representative, Ms. London. I think that the communication has got to happen, or you're never going to find out what the root issues are. We obviously know that funding and resources continue almost on a yearly basis be a major concern, but there's just also the feeling of lack of support from the administration that I know that a lot of teachers and staff feel. So basically, just complete transparency and communication and honesty.
Now over to District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
One of the things that we do at Learning Tree Preschool, since I had been on the board and previously to that, is have the same thing, a satisfaction survey that's not just teachers, but also the parents are involved with. And we get those as a board and we discuss them. And I can't imagine that with the satisfaction survey that went out to these teachers, that the board of BCSC did not see some of the results. I would want to know all of the results. I would want to know, well, why is it like this? Find the why behind this. And who do I go to that? I'm going to go to Amy London. I'm going to go to the CEA. I'm going to go to other teachers. And to do that, you would need to change Rule 3112, because right now can't do that. And that's doing a disservice to our educators, and it's doing a disservice to our students. Thank you.
Next, from District 7, Mrs. Ulery.
I agree with Mr. Jamerson. I'm not aware of the cause of this decline in satisfaction as well, or what the questions were asked. So it's a little bit difficult to address just on the top. But I do feel it's important to take a pulse of the staff members of a large corporation such as ours. BCSC should pride itself on attracting the best educators that we can, but also show that it values the retention of those. It can do this through communication and acknowledging the values of all opinions. I would offer that the most common issues be addressed first and then communicated across the corporation. This is not a one-time effort, but a more of an evolving endeavor that should be improved upon each year. If a mediator would be helpful, I suggest we might provide open discussions between staff and whoever else needs to be in the room. Thank you.
Last from District 7, Ms. Wheeldon.
As I've done my own staff satisfaction surveys, communication is always the very first thing that people say that they don't get enough of. They don't get enough information. They don't understand the issues. So it's not surprising that this would be reflected, in the school corporation as well. I think that as a board member, obviously, we're going to be presented with issues that come to us in various ways. I also think it's our responsibility, and we've all talked about how we want to keep a pulse, and form our own opinions on what's really happening. I do think for it to be successful, though, you do have to have some sort of a communication system that has some structure to it so expectations are understood. And so, we'll talk about the article at question later, but at the end of the day, designing something that allows people to have a relevant voice and figure out how does that reach the level of the board, I think is really important and probably needs some work and focus for people to feel heard. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Question 7. School board policy 3112 currently states that all communication between school employees and school board members must go through the superintendent. The policy goes so far to outline how students, school staff, and school board members may speak to one another if they happen to bump into each other in public. Teachers have in the past been subject to disciplinary measures for writing to or speaking to school board members. Should school employees be allowed to communicate with school board members, and would you support revising or eliminating policy 3112 if elected? First up from District 5, Ms. Corsi.
Thank you. I would absolutely want to revise 3112. I think that it is extremely important to get the educator's opinion to a school board member. It happens at Learning Tree. If there's a problem, a teacher brings it to a school board member and nothing wrong happens. That's how we would fix things. I think that the request should be reasonable, though. It's not a matter of a teacher complaining about, oh, they didn't like the way that their supervisor handled this or that. But please, use that time to speak to the school board members wisely. What are the things that are going to be key to then increase the satisfaction that you have as a teacher and increase your effectiveness as a teacher? So absolutely, let's overhaul that and move on with our lives so we can do better for everyone involved. Thank you.
Next, from District 7, Ms. Wheeldon.
So I think the part about that policy that was a little surprising to me. Number one, I didn't realize it applied to the entire state. It's not just BCSC, which I found interesting. The second thing was that there's punitive results. And so that seems a little harsh, right? Just having a conversation can get you in trouble. That being said, so I think a revision of it makes total sense because we've all talked about how transparency is important. However, I do think that with a voice comes an obligation to be part of the solution. And so I'm very much a person that says, if you come to me with a problem, I absolutely want to work with you on that, but you need to be part of the solution too. And so I think I'll go back to my previous answer of having some structure of communication, having expectations set. What is the process we're going to follow for that? I think needs some work for sure, but it's a two-way street, and I think that should be designed in the expectations to start with. Thank you.
Mrs. Ulery.
I do believe in the chain of command, and for the most part, I've worked under similar policies most of my adult life. Individual school principals should be able to make decisions and implement solutions quickly, and they're usually those that know the circumstances and related details that are being brought up. The initial conversation can be quite frank and perhaps solvable, but not in all instances. The policy then provides for the issue to continue to move up to the next higher person, again with the chance for solutions to be agreed upon. As a board member, I understand the need for me to be a part of the policy making, as the board has no authority for administrative actions, but is supportive to the superintendent. But if this policy needs to be reviewed for language be refreshed, then that should happen. I would hope that there could be more open communication agreed to in the future. Thank you.
Now from District 3, Mr. Grimes.
Yes, I would certainly be in agreement that 3112 certainly needs to be looked at and discussed and revised to meet current needs. I did notice that it was adopted in 2004, so it's been quite some time, and a lot of the other policies under the board staff communication I've noticed have been revised, and this is one that's remained static for 16 years. And so, just because, disagreement is going to happen across the board at all levels. And just because disagreement happens doesn't mean that it needs to be adversarial. And so certainly I believe that is a policy that needs looked at, reworked, and it could be a very good thing in terms of opening up open, honest communication lines.
Next from District 3, Mr. Persinger.
I'm glad you brought this one up. I have already submitted a proposal to eliminate sections B and C of policy 3112, and I'm pushing very hard to have that done before the end of the year. And also rewriting section A so that it removes all punitive measures taken by the administration to a teacher or faculty member that does directly communicate with the board. And that is something that is very high on my priority list right now. And Mr. Bryant and I have actually been working together on this and working with Mr. Caldwell to get this pushed through.
Lastly, from District 3, Mr. Jamerson.
I've had the opportunity to work on a number of boards, both local, regional, and at the national level. And in every one of those situations, there have been policies and procedures that talk about how employees can express their concerns and their work issues. And those policies all have a process that takes it through the chief administrator, in this case, the superintendent. I think 3112 does certainly have, there are some issues that I would consider redoing. But I think it's always important to welcome discussions about pedagogy, technology, new models of instruction. And however, those discussions can't be about personnel issues or workplace issues, because those need to follow established policies and procedures to ensure that individuals are treated fairly and that the issues are resolved.
Thank you, candidates. Question 8. Knowing that public schools do not receive adequate funding, it is important to be fiscally sound and to have clear budget priorities. What adjustments, if any, would you like to see to BCSC's budget and/or how it is managed? We're going to start with District 7 this time. Mrs. Ulery, you're up.
I don't know that I have any changes to propose tonight, but what I was surprised to learn that in 2020, the total salary expense increased 1.65% from prior year budget, while the cost of benefits increased 8.2%. That's a tremendous pressure to stay competitive with benefits cost just year to year, and something most companies and not-for-profits struggle through each year. BCSC must review this line item and keep adequate cash flow throughout the year. I see priorities being these, along with making sure there's resource officers present and others necessary to keep our students safe. Entry points must be secure, and that's not a small cost. And of course, our community recently weighed in on the budget priorities to recruit and retrain quality educators, provide safe employment, and keep our buses running. Thank you.
Next from District 7, Mrs. Wheeldon.
I'm no match for Lacretia. She's a finance person, so I'm worried about competing here. But first, I did look at the budget. I was happy to see that the largest portion of the budget is going to our teacher salaries. So obviously, I feel like the priority is in the right place for them, for the majority of the money going to them. I manage a budget, and so I know how difficult it is to manage competing priorities. You don't want to fix a roof. Nobody wants to spend money on roofs, but you got to have a roof. So every year budgets are a difficult thing to manage through, and I think having a lot of voices in setting those priorities is important. I think one thing that in going through actually our own budget process this year that I think should always be a priority is the continuing education of the people in the process. And so understanding how we're making sure we're funding teachers' development, I think should be represented somewhere in there if it's not already today. Thank you.
From District 3, Mr. Persinger.
One thing I would like to say about the budget is that, yes, every year there's going to be improvements and renovations and modifications to facilities and buildings. That's, just the nature of the beast. But one thing that I would like to see, and that we have been doing for some time now, is if we're going to spend the money on making those renovations, I would like to see it being spent on more green and energy efficient utilities that would, in the long term, save us on spending for utility costs, electricity, heat, things like that, and that would open up funding in the budget for things such as wages and other resources for teachers, more staff members, more TAs. But I think we need to be smart about what we're spending our money on. Thank you.
Also from District 3, Mr. Jamerson. Mr. Jamerson, I think you're muted.
I'm so involved in the other answers. It's important to remember how schools are funded and how those funds can be spent. BCSC receives funding from state revenue for instruction, and that includes the teachers' salaries and all of the other instructional items. Funding for all of the other items that we have, maintenance, renovation, transportation, paying down our debts, are funded by our property taxes. I believe BCSC has done an outstanding job in managing those property tax amounts and being a good steward of how they use those property tax dollars to ensure that our facilities really are providing the very best possible spaces for learning, and in making sure that when upgrades are done, that they impact the physical plant as much as they do the instructional space.
From District 3, Mr. Grimes.
Yes, I think what we need to do now, certainly, given the times of all the chaos and fallout from COVID-19, is certainly keep in mind that what we're spending now are last year's tax dollars, and take the time now to plan ahead for leaner, tougher times that are inevitable. And certainly, BCSC very fortunate in that the referendum passing, and certainly need to be good stewards of the referendum dollars and oversee a very responsible use of those. And what continues to need to be a budget priority certainly is somehow find a way to attract teachers from an ever-increasing limited pool of teachers out there, and once they are attracted here, how to keep them here. Thank you.
And lastly, from District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you on the teachers being not only attracted here, but retained here. I've had the opportunity to speak to a couple of teachers who have said that they have lost their, support staff, TAs, because they got a better job at Lowe's or they got a better job at Target. And to me, that's kind of not doing a service to our district if we can't retain those folks with a competitive wage. I also really like what Mr. Persinger said about the green initiatives for these buildings, because that will save money over time, a little bit of upfront cost versus over the long run. As far as the budgeting, I was in the school board meeting last week and they talked about the budget. A lot of it was very involved, but I had a feeling that the BCSC school board members get a heftier packet and can go over it and ask more in-depth questions. And so as a school board member, I would really hope that to go over that with a fine-tooth comb. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for sharing your thoughts on the management of BCSC and for its staff issues. For our last two questions, we're going to reflect upon our progress as a corporation and ask how we can grow going forward. Question 9. The beginning of this school year was fraught with challenges, to say the least. Teachers voiced concerns about the safety of returning to school. Many parents spoke about the lack of equity among BCSC's 3 options of learning for the school year. Everyone has focused on school safety more than ever. What do you believe could have been done differently to start the school year and hopefully with less strife? Beginning with District 3, Mr. Grimes.
Oh man, that's a toughie. Certainly in my 30 years of education, and you know, I don't think we've ever experienced anything as difficult and challenging and controversial as COVID-19. And you know, I felt like for a while you talk to 100 different people, you get 100 different opinions on the matter. And you know, I think, let me say, I have a real respect for the school board and the administration and the central office that spend inordinate amounts of time planning and making sure that we have the best interests of kids in mind. And boy, what to do at the beginning, that is, you know, it's very tough. I heard someone summarize it as saying we just kind of had to wade in and see what happens. And just when you think you have everything figured out, something else comes about. And
I'm sorry, I believe you're out of time. Next from District 3, Mr. Jamerson. Mr. Jamerson, you are muted.
As the director of technology for 20 years, I appreciate the challenges that every new school year presents. Fall of 2020 had all of those complications of delivering instruction and the complications of delivering instruction in 3 different modes. Over the past month, I've had the opportunity to meet with parents who've said that each one of these modalities, whether it was in-person, bridge, or the Columbus virtual pathways, was the best choice for their families and was really important to their student. That said, delivering instruction simultaneously in person and in bridge is complicated and difficult. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for those teachers who had to do this. I think getting bridge up and running was an amazing task. And it was something that certainly took invention on the way.
From District 3, Mr. Persinger.
I made my position clear over the summer, and as I still do, I think that starting on time with the availability in school was a mistake. I think we should have started out with online instruction as a temporary measure, and then moved into the 3 phases that we have, the in-person, bridge, and CVP. I think that would have given our teachers more adequate time to prepare for the school year. I think that it was rushed. That's why we had so many issues at the beginning and still continue to do, honestly. But I think giving them the time to prepare that they could have needed would have been a great step forward, and also having more transparency and communication from the administration to not only the teachers and staff, but the public at large would have been a great benefit as well.
Now for District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
Thank you. I've had the privilege of talking to not only teachers and parents and students about how their experience has been from this. Overall, what I have learned is that teachers don't feel as though they had an adequate amount of time to prepare for such a transition. I believe Dr. Roberts had said at one of the school board meetings that I attended recently that it would be very easy for him to just say, we're going to do all e-learning, because then everybody's on the same page. That's not what our population in Columbus responded with the survey that was sent out. There were people that were not comfortable with going in person, and so the bridge program was offered. I would have liked to have more time for the teachers to prepare for this, because that's a big transition when they're teaching in person and online. It is a huge factor for BCSC, and I do believe transparency and clarity with things would go a long way between our families and our administration. Thank you.
From District 7, Mrs. Wheeldon.
So I understand the concept of not feeling like you had enough time to prepare. We restarted a plant and I've never been more nervous than that first day when we had hundreds of people walking in the door and me feeling like, oh my gosh, did we do it all right? Are we keeping them safe? Are we doing the right things? I also know that you'll never have enough time. You'll never feel ready. COVID, nobody understands everything that there is to know. And so I think you could have given another month, another 2 months, and you might not have still felt like you were ready. I think the real test is how are students feeling? And I can say firsthand, my daughter is thrilled to go back to school. And although it might have felt a little clunky the first couple of days, I think she's learning. I think she's engaged. So from a customer process, I'm pretty happy with it all. I guess the only thing I would say is what can we do differently is, are we continuing to address the things that we don't like? Do we have a way to improve? Are we getting feedback? Are we listening to teachers and making things available for them to get better where they feel they need it? Thank you.
Also from District 7, Mrs. Ulery.
This school year has presented challenges, fears, and changes in routine like no other. The online instruction method has been put to test, with some students being able to continue studies on a seamless basis, while others really struggle to navigate this mode of learning. There's probably no one size fits all approach, but rather a plan to start and do readjustments as needed. We may want to consider more training for students and parents needing this help, just a little bit more to get comfortable, or possibly a list of helpful resources like study groups or tutors that they may reach out to themselves. But we should continue to look for those that struggle and are falling through the cracks for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We're now ready for our last question of the evening, after which candidates will give a 1-minute closing statement. For our last question, we wanted to end on a positive note. What's one thing that the school corporation has done very well in the past that you will build upon as a school board member, and how? We're going to start with District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
Thank you. One of the things, I'm very new to BCSC, considering I have only a first grader and a 4-year-old. But one of the things that I think that BCSC has done extremely well is implementing the Legato program at Clifty Creek Elementary. My son loves it. It is so amazing. He speaks Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I think giving students that gift of absolutely making them a global citizen, getting them ready for the workplace, getting them bilingual and biliterate, you know, that's going to help them understand so much more of our world and make them ready to jump into the workforce and make them, you know, culturally sensitive to others. I love that. And I don't know a whole lot about other programs of BCSC, but man, I've got my notes and I'm learning. But yes, Legato for us, for my family. Thank you.
From District 7, Mrs. Ulery.
I so much agree with you, Jennifer, and I get really excited when kids are excited for learning. So that there's just nothing more that pleases me. But at the top of my list is the technology and the online learning, especially right now. But my agency, Turning Point, has delivered prevention education to all junior and senior high schools. And they're doing this. They turned this on a dime back in April when they had to go to online learning. And I just watched them morph to it, and they're actually doing it this fall again. But as a result, it's growing with these teens to bring healthy relationships into their lives, and hopefully gives them a head start for the challenges after the high school years. I'm very proud of that.
Also from District 7, Mrs. Wheeldon.
I think one of the things I've been most impressed with in BCSC is just all of the options that there are available. If you're a kid that wants to understand the world, you can find a program like Legato or Tyro. My kid's in Tyro at Northside, and she can learn French or Spanish. I think if you're a kid that wants to do skilled trades, later in life, you can find a hands-on program that meets your needs. I've had babysitters that they graduate high school in December and are taking college credits their last semester, and what a head start that gives them. So there's all of these programs that I think speak to everybody, right? No matter what kind of kid you are, no matter what your circumstance, you can find something that fits you and gives you kind of a best chance. So I think those options to me are really amazing, and just seeing what are the holes that we have in that. And is there another group that we can reach going forward? That's maybe where we could continue to build. But I've been really impressed so far with what I've seen. Thank you.
From District 3, Mr. Jamerson.
There are so many successes, I think, at BCSC that a minute certainly doesn't give them much justice. But there's one particular area, and that's the partnership the BCSC has developed with the city and the use of the TIF funds. The Transitions Program, which gives a whole new look at how we take and find meaningful occupations for our students with special needs upon graduation, and the iGrad program, where 97% of the students in the program end up graduating. And that's an outstanding number when you consider the fact that so many of those students might not have even graduated at all. And I think the third program that success that I'd like to hold up is the Counseling Counts program. And I think that that's impacted our students at every level, and it's really been an important one during this difficult time.
Next from District 3, Mr. Persinger.
I think our greatest success that I have seen over the last several years with my experience with BCSC, and especially the last 6 months, has been the tenacity and the dedication of all the teachers and the faculty that work in our school buildings. A lot of the programs that are so popular, like Legato and iGrad and Counseling Counts, were brought to fruition based on teacher recommendations or staff recommendations, people coming up with ideas, or hearing about something from a different school corporation and bringing it to our attention and looking into it. So it's their dedication and their passion for what they do that really just exemplifies the positiveness that comes out of BCSC.
Lastly, from District 3, Mr. Grimes.
Well, there are lots and lots. Just last night, I watched again the school bus drivers and their tribute to the class of 2020 when they drove the buses to spell out 2020. I mean, things like that, from the school foundation to going out and celebrating teachers with awards at the end of the year, teachers doing innovative things in the classroom, student accomplishments from academic teams to extracurriculars, you name it. But the one thing that really stands out to me and was impressive is the passing of the referendum. I think that's a clear example of how well clear, open, honest communication can work. And I think that's an example that the community is behind, does have confidence in the school corporation, and and we need to continue growing that community confidence and build on that and the communication that it created. Thank you.
Candidates, thank you for sharing your answers with us tonight. We appreciate all the time you've devoted to answering questions from BCSC teachers for the public. We will now give each candidate 1 minute to deliver closing remarks, beginning with District 7 and Mrs. Wheeldon.
I'm still impressed with you all. So the voters have a really difficult decision ahead of them. I think what I wanted to leave today was just, I think people should have two things in mind when they choose a board member to represent them. Number one is, why is the person doing this? Okay, and I wanted you to understand I'm doing this because I'm a mom. I care about education, and I really want to serve the community in a way that I think I can in a meaningful way, in a way that leverages my skills, in a way I can apply my passion. And then the other one, do they have the skills they need to do the job? Being on a board is really tough, right? You have to study up on issues. You have to be prepared to have brave, tough conversations. You have to be comfortable with conflict. All of the personnel decisions, there's all kinds of things that come across the desks of our board members, and you have to be prepared to do that. And I think my experience in the workplace kind of sets me up well for those responsibilities. So again, great getting to know you all. Thanks for the opportunity today.
Next from District 7, Mrs. Ulery.
I'd like to thank the Columbus Educators Association for this forum and allowing all of the BCSC board candidates to be a part of this discussion on education issues. Although I'm running as a District 7 candidate, I do understand the importance of educating myself on the entire school district. I hope you found the information that I've shared to be meaningful. I consider what I've learned tonight will no doubt flatten my learning curve to be a productive member of the school board. If there are any follow-up questions, I know that you're going to have contact information. Please contact me. I look forward to working for the benefit of Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation students and educators. Thank you.
From District 3, Mr. Persinger.
Just wanted to thank everyone from CEA again for all the hard work of putting together this forum. Appreciate the opportunity for all of us to be able to get together and discuss, our ideas and views to your questions from all the teachers and members of our community. And I would just like to say that as a member of the board, I have, spent the last 4 years doing my best to represent not just the people of my district, them specifically, but all members of our community. And anytime a vote has been cast, it has been with the best knowledge that I have from the community and their opinions of how they want me to vote. Regardless of what I think, my personal opinions on a subject, as an elected representative, I vote the way that I am instructed to by my constituents.
From District 3, Mr. Grimes.
Thank you to CEA and ISTA for putting together this forum. As a teacher for the past 30 years, I feel incredibly lucky and fortunate to have chosen a profession that I find so rewarding and fulfilling. I enjoy teaching every bit as much today, perhaps even more than I did when I first started. And looking back and thinking back, reflecting on my 13 years of schooling as a student in BCSC, I also feel very fortunate to have had so many excellent teachers and coaches that helped mold me into the person that I am today. And as a potential board member, it would be my hope, first and foremost, that all BCSC students continue to receive the best education filled with positive experiences that they possibly can. And I believe my commitment to the extreme importance of quality public education and the Columbus community, along with my varied experiences, would make me a positive contributor to the BCSC school board. Thank you.
Also from District 3, Mr. Jamerson.
Thanks to Amy London and the leadership of the CEA for making all this forum possible. And thanks to my fellow candidates for sharing your thoughts in this evening's forum. And thanks to all of the hardy souls out there who stayed the course and are still with us. We're blessed to have a great community that cares deeply about all of our students. And when I first went to work for BCSC more than 20 years ago, I thought this was the best job I could possibly have, because what I was doing was building a product that was just unbelievable, and that product was the future. And that's what I think we need to be focused on, is embracing the future and bringing our kids a place where they can be the very best citizens and participants in our community. I hope that I'll have your vote to be part of the BCSC board. Thank you.
And from District 5, Mrs. Corsi.
Thank you. This has been fun, if not really nerve-wracking as well. I like BCSC, it says on the website, and it's been the motto, it's deeper learning works. And part of my deeper learning after I decided to run for a school board position was make a lot of notes. I'm not even halfway through all of the things that I need to know, but this is part of my education as well. And I can promise you that I am here to serve, and I can promise you that I don't have all the answers. But you know what? I'm going to do my absolute best to find those answers and to get them to who it needs to go to. I want to find out our why. And I will not, I mean, I'll stumble. I'm a human and I'm not polished all the time, but I am here to serve our community and our students and our teachers. And I'm excited for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your participation tonight. We hope this evening has helped voters make the decision about who to cast their vote for in this upcoming school board election. Remember, tomorrow is National Voter Registration Day. If you haven't already registered to vote, tomorrow is the perfect day to do it. You can do so online at indianavoters.in.gov. The deadline to vote is October 5th, so don't delay. You may begin early voting on October 6th. Early voting in Bartholomew County will be in Fair Oaks Mall and will be open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays. If you are voting by absentee ballot, you must have returned your absentee ballot application by October 22nd. Absentee ballots are due November 2nd by 12 p.m. Election day is November 3rd. Did you have a question you wanted to ask the candidates to answer tonight, but you didn't hear it asked? You can follow up with all the school board candidates themselves. Check our Facebook and Twitter pages for follow-up contact information for each candidate. Thank you again for attending our BCSC School Board Forum, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.